And as soon as we think we exist as a separate self, then we imagine the world exists objectively, and it becomes a self-reinforcing feedback loop where we actually are casting a spell on ourselves, thinking we exist in a way that we don't. That's the mind virus. When you have the realization that, wait a second, what I'm suffering from is a reflection of what's happening collectively, you see through the illusion of the separate self. That's to recognize our interconnectedness, our interdependence. That's to be on the pathway towards that, oh wow, we are actually one, we're not separate. And in the realm of psyche, we are all interconnected. That's Jung's idea of the collective unconscious, that we're all interconnected via this, in a way, higher dimensional mind.
Welcome to Connecting with Coincidence. I am your host, Bernie Beitman. I'm a psychiatrist. And when I was growing up, and maybe a lot of you had this too, but there was a nursery rhyme that I saw finally unpacked by a guy on YouTube. And you might look it up, just put the song in there and you'll find it, I think. And the song went, row, row, row your boat gently down the stream. Merrily, 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 life is but a dream. We're going to get into that nursery rhyme because a lot of times these nursery rhymes contain information that's more mystical than we know, more beyond our regular reality as we get more locked into the conventional way of looking at things. And our guest today is going to help us see more deeply, as his first story will show you, and see more deeply that life is but a dream. Paul Levy is a pioneer in the field of spiritual emergence. Not emergency, emergence. Paul is a wounded healer in private practice, assisting others who are also awakening to the dreamlike nature of reality. He's authored 6 books, 3 of which are on Wetiko, the mind virus, or Wetiko. His soon-to-be-released book is The Quantum Revelation, Awakening to the Dreamlike Nature of Reality. He is the founder of Awaken in the Dream community in Portland, Oregon. An artist, he is deeply steeped in the work of C.G. Jung and has been a Tibetan Buddhist practitioner for over 40 years. At the very beginning stages of life-transforming spiritual awakening, something happened that he's going to tell us about. This experience literally saved his life and became the entire seed of his life's work. So, Paul, tell us a coincidence story.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I just want to say I'm so happy to be here with you. Yeah, so it happened.
Thank you.
This was in May 1981, and I was in my mid-20s. I was deeply suffering from a trauma, and I don't need to go into the story, but because of the suffering, I had gone incredibly inwards, just inside of my own mind, just assuming the position of the witness for a couple of years, about 4 hours a day on the average. And one day I'm sitting in meditation and I get hit by a bolt of lightning, not from the sky, but inside of my brain. And within hours, I went into such an altered state in which I began to realize, oh my God, this is a collective dream that we're having. Not in this sort of, in like this metaphorical sense, but in a literal sense. And I was so ecstatic that I really, people were concerned because it was stepping out of my ordinary character. And so this was in the Bay Area in May 1981. I get brought by an ambulance to Highland Hospital in Oakland, California, because my friend who I was with, he was thinking, oh my God, my friend Paul is having a psychotic break. So, I just want to say, so it's interesting that you're a psychiatrist and I'm telling the story too, because the experience happened. I get brought by ambulance to my first psychiatric ward. And it's nighttime. It's, a little bit after dinner. And I get brought in by the people from the ambulance into the psych ward, and I get brought into this room and where all the patients are, and they had just had dinner. And I'm in this incredibly, open, expansive state in which I'm realizing, oh my God, we're having a dream. We're dreaming this into materialization each and every moment, the whole universe. And as they bring me into the room, I immediately see this one patient, and she's an older woman, and her eyes are, opaque. She's blind. It's just obvious. They're not translucent and filled with light, but they're dead eyes. And I immediately, like I'm drawn to her, I just find myself going right up to her. And as if I was given a script, all of a sudden out of my mouth came the words, all you have to do to see is open your eyes and look. And I kept on repeating these words like I was channeling something. And I kept on getting closer and closer to her. And I was just staring in her eyes the whole while. The whole thing took about a minute. And as I was repeating these words, by the end of that minute, her eyes became completely glowingly luminous, healthy, radiant, seeing eyes. And at that moment, they came and they took me and, the psychiatrist, and they strapped me up in a room on a bed. And here it is. It's needless to say, I didn't sleep that night. I was just tripping out over what had just happened. And then just to complete the story, the next morning they unstrapped me and they put me in a room. And keep in mind this is a psych ward, and the only other person in the room is now this ex-blind woman, and she's just smiling at me from ear to ear, not saying a word. And all of a sudden, my heart chakra, I had never had this experience before, it just blossomed. And then I understood, oh, I get it. Her eyes, she had hysterical self-created blindness, and that inwardly she wasn't letting herself look. And I somehow had tuned into that in whatever way I did. And she was at the point in her process of being ready to heal. And I just said, these lines that were given to me as the impetus, the catalyst to help her to open her inner eyes, which then healed her outer eyes. And then she said the only word she ever said to me. She asked me, she goes, aren't you going to answer the phone call from, and she mentions my father's name. And then within seconds, the nurse comes in in the room and says, Paul, your father's on the phone, because my parents had just gotten word that I had had a supposedly psychotic break. And so, the story continues, but that's the essence of the story I wanted to share. And it totally changed my life, because that next 18 months, I was just having this full-blown spiritual awakening of the dreamlike nature. Stuff that was happening was completely physically impossible. It could only happen in dreams. And maybe 3, 4 other times I was put in psych wards and diagnosed with the newly discovered chemical imbalance. But having had that experience really saved my life, because I knew that everybody was telling me, oh, you're manic depressive, you'll have this mental illness for the rest of your life. And as they were diagnosing me, I was diagnosing them, going, they're completely ignorant. They have no idea what's happening. And so that's what saved me. And the core of that experience with the blind woman, and I can talk more about this, it's informed and given shape to my whole body of work that I've created for over 30 years. That's helped a lot of people.
That's a pretty incredible story. And not so incredible also. Your psychotic break that led you to the hospital. Could you describe that a little bit more so other people can have some sense of the state of mind you were in when you met this blind woman?
Yeah. So, just the context for and I don't like the word psychotic break, because that just sort of implies that there was something pathological about it. I see it as an extreme state. I kind of like that phrase better. But the context for the extreme state was just intense suffering. And, you know, I don't need to go into the story, but that really inspired me to look within, to really develop that witnessing consciousness. And then once I got hit by that bolt of lightning, which had happened the day before, and I went into this unbelievably ecstatic state. What I was having the realization of, I mean, I remember really clearly saying to myself, "Oh my God, we're all characters in each other's dream. We're having a collective
Yeah. Oh,
dream."
and let's do that one over again. We're all characters in each other's dream. I mean that I sorry to interrupt, but
Yeah,
that's one of my favorite ideas, and I call it
yeah,
a movie rather than a
yeah,
dream because it's happening during waking life, and
yeah,
I'm
yeah,
playing a
yeah,
role, you're playing a role, and we're in the same movie together, and
yeah, yeah, yeah.
we've agreed to play each role in this thing,
Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah. No, totally.
sometimes.
And for me, it's equivalent whether you call it a movie or a dream. It's the same idea, you know, that we're like in a cooperative way conjuring up the shared universe that we're inhabiting together, and we're doing this moment by moment. And I was so unprepared. I was 24 years old. I was so unprepared for the majesty of the realization I was having that I was just so enthusiastic. And in Theos, etymologically, it means to be filled with spirit. I was just ecstatic. And I was in consensus reality. Actually, I was in the San Francisco airport. My friend from college who was visiting, we were going to fly up to Seattle to see a college friend. And I was in this completely ecstatic state. And that's what alerted the authorities. The police got called. I got, you know, taken by ambulance to the hospital. So I was having this realization. I was having the experience that we all dream about. I was waking up but like right away, I got brought to this hospital and I see now the perfection, like the choreography, you know, the higher dimensional choreography that brought me exactly at that moment to that hospital with that blind woman and all the events that then conspired. It was just unbelievable, sort of a coincidence, a very auspicious coincidence of factors.
Uh, Two things, higher dimensional choreography and witnessing.
Uh-huh. Yeah, well, you know, from my point of view, it was all one quantum system. And in a quantum system, and this universe is quantum in every scale, there's no separate parts that are interacting. You know, whatever's happening in the world, what's happening in our mind, it's all interrelated. It's not separate. So it just felt like that moment of meeting that blind woman and having that happen. You know, I mean, because basically the whole essence of my work that I've created and the books I've written are basically trying to share with people. All you have to do to see is open your eyes and look. And so it was interesting to me upon reflection that holographically encoded in that actual scenario that happened in that psychiatric ward in May 1981 was the seed of my whole life's body of work.
That was the seed for your whole life's body of work, which is open up your eyes and you can see. And the woman had hysterical blindness, which means
Right,
some psychological thing was making her not want to see. Usually it's something that you don't want to see, that you have to cut off your eyes not to
right,
see, your
right.
vision to see. And then as part of your interaction with her, you had, for me, the fun of her saying, you better answer the phone call from your father, which you didn't know was coming. So that there was an ability for her to know something about what was about to happen to you, precognition, telepathy,
Yeah, yeah,
different
yeah.
names for the same thing.
Right, right. No, totally. And the thing is, you know, when people like when I tell the story, my age, I don't want people to think, oh, I can heal blindness. No, I didn't do anything. All I was at that moment when she and I had that interaction, when her blindness got healed, was I was just open to the healing that was, you know, thirsting to happen in the field. And I just was open enough to become an instrument for these words to come through me, which were the very words that she evidently needed to hear to help her to heal her own, self-created blindness. And that's what's really interesting, because that is like, from my point of view, symbolically showing us something that we can all just become open instruments to allow the deeper healing that's wanting to happen in the field, in the non-local field in which we're contained and of which we're expressions, to just come through us and to create healing in the universe. And so that's one way of understanding one of the gifts when seen symbolically, when seen as if it were a dream. Like, say if I had a dream and the dream was that I healed this blind woman, and then I woke up and I'm contemplating the dream. Oh, what is the dream expressing symbolically? That's what I'm talking about now.
Yeah. And the dreams expressed symbolically, one of your missions, I'll say, in life. Uh, Paul's going to help people awaken, which in Paul's terms will have something to do with open your eyes. You can
Right.
do it.
And this is exactly in the Bible. I mean, in one of my books, I have a whole chapter on, in the Bible, Christ kept on saying, people have eyes but don't see. People they don't even know their eyes could see. People are closing their eyes so they can't see the light. He's pointing at exactly this dynamic. This is, I've written 3 books on this mind virus, on the Wetiko mind virus. This is the mind virus. This is exactly what Christ was pointing at, you know?
I think it's now that you brought it up, it's the term mind virus is going to be foreign to a lot of people watching and listening to this, and it's a key part of what you're doing. This Wetiko idea, Wetiko. It's central, and open your eyes is central. And it's at this point in our conversation, it's open your eyes to your blindness. And Wetiko for me had meant that it's our self-destructive tendencies that we each carry with us, so that we keep in mind our own tendency to harm ourselves.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, so this idea of this mind virus, so the Wetiko term, it's a Native American term, and it really has to do with it's a form of blindness, interestingly enough. And it's a form of blindness that doesn't know it's blind. But more than that, it actually thinks it's sighted, and it thinks it's more sighted than people who actually see. And so the thing is the first step in healing this mind blindness is to become aware that there's a part of us that's blind. And because if we don't, then our energy gets channeled into exactly what you're saying, into self-destruction. And that's why in all my work, again and again, I point out that the cure, the medicine for this mind virus is to access our creative nature. And instead of having our sort of life force boomeranging and expressing itself destructively, whether it's individually or collectively, like we see on the world stage right now, we can tap into that same energy. And instead of channeling it in a destructive way, we channel it constructively, creatively. And that's kryptonite to Wetiko.
That's kryptonite. Superman doesn't like kryptonite, and he was a positive guy. But for Wetiko, he's a negative guy, and
No, it kills Wetiko. It takes away Wetiko's power over us at all. It empowers us when we connect with our nature as creative beings. Because to the extent we're not in touch consciously with our creativity, you can conceive of the Wetiko mind virus co-opting our own creative energy and turning it against us. That's the diagnosis for the malady that afflicts our species, and we're acting it out writ large on the world stage.
turn our own creative energy against us.
Yeah.
How do we reverse that process, Paul?
Yeah. Well, I mean, just I'll take a step back. In the apocryphal text, they talk about Wetiko. They call it the counterfeiting spirit. In other words, it puts us on. It's a master impersonator. It'll present us this false version of ourselves. Oh, I'm wounded, I'm limited, I'm traumatized, and then if we're not awake in that moment and we identify with Wetiko's version of ourselves, then it has us, then it can manipulate us. So the idea is to the extent that we actually remember who we are, connect with our true nature, and that's such a cliche, oh, to connect with our true nature. What does that mean? Our true nature, by its nature, is creative. So when we have realization of our true nature, we embody and express ourselves creatively. And the more we do that, the more we deepen our realization of our nature in a positive feedback loop that breaks the regression, the infinite regression, the double bind, the self-reinforcing feedback loop of the mind virus. It all has to do with connecting with who we are, and who we are we are made in the image of our creator, in that we are creative beings. We are dreaming up our experience each and every moment of ourselves and our experience of the world each and every moment. But if we're not aware of that, then we feel victimized. And then the world is just happening to us. And we've disconnected from our creative agency and power. And then Wetiko can have a field day.
And Wetiko can have a field day. You're very passionate about this. I think we can all feel that, about trying to help humanity get relief from the ingrained Wetiko that we all seem to have running around with us, especially in this current environment.
Yeah,
As you well know, just telling people that what you just said isn't enough,
right,
and that writing about it isn't enough,
right,
and being passionate about it isn't enough. It may give
right.
some ideas to some people, but it has to be experiential. You have to have a switch somehow. And you're at San Francisco airport, which I've had many flights from in the past, and it's fun remembering it. I went on a rugby trip starting there one time. It's fun to be there, but you had quite a different experience, and that opened you up. I mean, it's literal. It opened you up, and
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
then you got taken to the right place, divine orchestration or higher dimensional orchestration, which is a very important idea here. It tends to feel to many of us like, hey, yeah, what's going on around here? Who's running this thing? Who's the producer of these things? I mean, you get a feeling like this for me is like a TV show, and it's like the Bernie show, and this stuff happens, and something comes in and makes something else happen. So there's this feeling of using that. You got a dream way of thinking about it. But what I'm asking you really is for our audience, how does one go from like being blinded and hearing what you're saying to opening up? How do you
Right.
do that? And
Yeah, yeah.
what's the
No,
role of
I get it.
and
Yeah.
what's the role of synchronicity in that is
Yeah,
my
yeah, yeah.
particular question.
Well, so one way that I very succinctly articulate the healing of the mind virus, of the Wetiko mind virus, is to see the dreamlike nature. And what that means, think about it, when you're in a dream. So say you're in a dream and you don't know that you don't know the nature of your circumstance. In other words, you don't realize you're dreaming, that the world you're inhabiting, you think it's separate and solid and objective, and then something happens in the dream, and you all of a sudden recognize, wait a second, I'm in a dream. I'm inside of my own psyche. And then you have this lucid dream. Well, what have you realized? You've realized that the outer world, the seemingly outer world of the dream, is actually an expression or a reflection of what's going on inside of you, that you recognize the correlation between the inner and the outer. Okay. So what I'm saying is that in the waking dream, we can actually have that realization and begin to see that, oh my God, what's playing out in the world is actually symbolically reflecting what's happening inside of me. Now, what is the language of dreams? It's symbols. This is why his whole career, Jung, the great psychiatrist, was trying to get across to people the profundity of developing what he called symbolic awareness. And what this means is that the universe is an oracle. It's continually speaking to us, and it's speaking to us symbolically. And if we keep our eyes closed, which is we are doing that to ourselves, then we're just going to continue to be asleep. But when you open your eyes and see, oh my God, this universe being like a dream, the outer world is actually expressing and reflecting what's happening inside of me. That's to begin to recognize the dreamlike nature. Then you're participating in the realization. It's not just an intellectual understanding, which only brings you so far. That's where you begin, to open that portal to really experience the dreamlike nature. And this is exactly what every spiritual wisdom tradition, I mean, that's what the word Buddha means. He who has awakened to the dreamlike nature. That's the whole point of this.
That's a new one to me. Buddha means he who has awakened to the dreamlike nature.
That's the translation. Yeah.
And what does synchronicity have to do with it?
Well, synchronicity is when these two, think about these opposites. There's matter, physical matter, right? And then there's mind. And we conceive of them as being totally distinct and different. Well, in these moments of where there's a synchronistic phenomena that's manifesting, all of a sudden those opposites of mind and matter become indistinguishable. And something that's happening inside of our psyche is actually revealing and expressing itself via the matter of the world, via the physical world. So all of a sudden at that moment, you can't tell the difference between what is psyche and what is physical matter. And one way of thinking about a synchronicity, it's like this little portal at that moment in time that you're experiencing it, in which the deeper underlying quantum field in which the opposites like mind and matter are united are revealing itself. So synchronicities are these moments of revelation that are freely being offered to us. And they're like revealing to us something about our nature, something about the world we live in, and something about our place in the world.
What, besides Jung's scarab, and your own personal experience, and aside from the blind woman, what would you tell us a major transformative synchronicity from your life that illustrates what you're saying?
Yeah, well, I'll take it the next step. Like I'm having one right now at this moment, because so keep in mind in that experience with the blind woman, I was thrown in a mental hospital and diagnosed. And then the next 18 months, I'm a free agent. I'm not in an ashram or a monastery being taken care of. I'm just out in the world having these mind-blowing revelations of the dreamlike nature. Stuff would happen in my life, completely physically impossible stuff. And yet, it could only happen in dreams, and it was happening in my life on a regular basis. And every psychiatrist was diagnosing me going, oh, you have this mental illness. You'll have it for the rest of your life. We guarantee that you're going to have to be on psychiatric drugs for the rest of your life. And, and like I was saying, having these experiences, they taught me, oh, they have no idea what is happening. So right now I'm having a major synchronicity in that I'm talking to you and you're a psychiatrist. And instead of, oh, me trying to convince you, oh, no, I'm not insane. I'm really, no, you're actually appreciating, what I'm trying to communicate. And I feel that, and I feel really seen by you, and something really profoundly, deep in me. Because keep in mind, psychiatry destroyed my entire family. Both of my parents were very mainstream. And my father, he was just an ignorant person, but he was in the role in this movie of the abuser. And my mother just enabled him. And once I got diagnosed and the suffering I was having was at the hands of my father's psychosis. Once I got diagnosed, my parents always played the card of, oh, well, you're just mentally ill, like for the rest. So they took it to the grave that they had a mental, I'm the only child, that their only child was mentally ill, in denial of his illness. And it was tragic. And then they died over 20 years ago. The rest of my family never spoke to me again because, my father had written the story that I was in denial of my mental illness. And so, it's been healing for me over the years. I become good friends with some, psychiatrists, some of them who are world famous. And so it's just, here's another example in this moment. The fact that you're a psychiatrist in the dream I'm having is, right now is very healing for me.
Well, that's cool. And uh, I'm one of several psychiatrists who you have established relationships with, in which you've been accepted and try to be understood, and that you felt that they could resonate with what you were telling you. Is there anything different, more separate, in addition to your experience with me compared to other psychiatrists that you've talked with?
Well, no, it's all the same, in the sense that the psychiatrists who I've connected with, I think they've recognized, oh, Paul isn't just like this mentally ill person, but on the contrary, he's, whether you call it this wounded healer or that he has a gift, that's come out of the torment of the suffering, because what I had to go through in the realm of psychiatry, it was complete torture. I never in a million years would have imagined the extent of insanity that was intrinsic to the psychiatric community. And so I think with you and my other psychiatrist friends, they've all really kind of had the recognition that, oh, well, not only is he not crazy, he actually has a gift to offer to all of us. And that's just there's something really deeply healing in that for me, because I just can't say enough about the unconsciousness of psychiatry as a system. And I mean, I'll just give you an example. So here I was having a full-blown spiritual awakening. They didn't recognize that. They didn't recognize the healthy aspect of my process. Here I was telling them about the emotional abuse from my father. They didn't believe me, and they protected my father. They protected the abuser. Then they forced down my throat to take medication that aborted the healthy aspect, the spiritual awakening aspect, and that brought up the traumatized aspect. In a way, it was recreating the abuse. And as soon as I then manifested as being sick based on their treatment, then that confirmed to them the objective truth of their diagnosis. So then they got even more entrenched in seeing me as sick. It was like being put under a spell by this bunch of these dark magicians. And the whole while I was trying to meta-communicate about what they were happening and what they were doing, which then just confirmed to them how ill I was. I mean, it was complete and utter madness. And it took me a number of years after that experience, because when that was happening, I really thought I had screwed up and wow, this is a mistake. And I was having a full-blown spiritual awakening, and all I needed was just to be supported and continue my unfoldment. And wow, I really screwed up by getting hospitalized. But years later, I recognized, no, that was part of the awakening. Getting put in psychiatry and locked up and medicated and diagnosed and having it destroy my entire family, that was in a way the shamanic descent into the hell realm. And I never would have believed the enormity of the darkness that existed in the halls of psychiatry without having experiencing it myself. So then I began to realize, oh, that was part of the awakening. That was the descent into the darkness.
I can't emphasize enough, Paul, the resilience that you have shown in all of this. And resilience is very much characterized by being able to take bad experiences and turn them into something positive.
Right.
And that's pretty much what you're saying about Wetiko as well, in a let me say, smaller but larger realm. that trying to turn the energy of Wetiko into something creative is what you are doing, have done a parallel of.
Yeah, yeah,
You are living what you're talking about.
yeah, yeah. No, and I really appreciate you reflecting that, because no, I'm trying my best to be a congruent, authentic sort of embodiment of the message that I'm giving out. Because what I went through, and we haven't even gone into the horror and the nightmare of the psychological, emotional abuse. I actually have a book I wrote, a 600-page book, just talking about it. But it's not important to go into the story. But between that and then, the horror, the nightmare of the whole psychiatric experience, without having had those experiences of the abuse from my father and the abuse from psychiatry, I never in a million years would have had the authority to write books about evil and to write and to discover, about the mind virus. I didn't discover it. I'm just a translator. Every spiritual tradition is pointing at it in different ways. But you're totally right. It's like we're all being called to be these alchemists. And really the essence of alchemy is turning lead, which interestingly is the negative father, symbolically into gold, into the awakened consciousness. And we're all like, that's our calling, to turn what's happening both individually in our lives, to turn the suffering, the darkness, the shadow, our unconscious, to transmute it alchemically into some form of blessing, some form of medicine, some sort of gift. And I'd like to think that's what I've been doing with my work and with my books that are helping people all over the world.
You are. What kinds of responses are you getting to this alchemical process that you have gone through, described to people, and had them give you some sense of how they experience you?
Yeah, the typical, I mean, some people, and I've noticed people who are just kind of embedded in the mainstream, they'll hear about a mind virus and they just don't relate. It goes over their head. They think it's woo-woo, new agey, whatever. But I've noticed people who've really gone through it, who really suffered, who really struggled with addiction, with trauma, with abuse issues, they'll read my work and right away their like head will explode. Their eyes will open and they'll be like, oh my God, he's talking about what I've been struggling with for decades, but I never had the words for. I never had the context for it. So, I've had people, who just write me thanking me profusely for like, oh my God, you found the words for what I've been suffering with, but I didn't have the language for. And it's just an example of me tapping in to that energy that was killing me, the mind virus and the abuse and the trauma, and alchemically, creatively finding expression for it. And by doing that, it's helping to heal me. And it's something that as I share it with other people, it can be medicine for them.
And what that brings me to, Paul, is my own interest in understanding the collective human mind. And what you've tapped into from what you just described was at least some people's responses, that those people who have gone through horrific experiences and have somehow survived them, and let's say coincidentally run into you one of your books, they begin to resonate with your experience and what you've derived from it. And what you're uncovering, it seems, with Wetiko and more, is a set of patterns and emotions that are residing actively in the collective human mind.
Yeah, no, you're so right on, in the sense that I think I've written 3 books on Wetiko, and the last one, I think it's the biggest chapter is on the idea of the wounded healer and the shaman, because the wounded healer and the shaman, in my mind, are equivalent terms. And I point out that that's the major archetype that's activated in the collective unconscious, you know. And what I mean specifically, because think about, well, first off, what is the wounded healer and shaman? It's the creative artist, it's the dreamer, it's the storyteller. And that archetype always gets consolated by some form of trauma. So we get traumatized, We can't integrate it in the normal way, so we dissociate. It's overwhelming. And that process constellates over time the person that would be shaman, wounded healer, to go off in search of the part of them that disassociated. And I'm pointing out that that's exactly what's happening in our world, that the shaman or the wounded healer always makes a descent into the darkness of the unconscious. And I think, in his work, Jung is openly saying again and again, the problem of our time is that we don't understand what's happening. And he clarifies, he says, what is happening is we are having a direct encounter with the darkness of the soul, with the darkness of the unconscious. So and I finished this chapter on the shaman weeks before the lockdown happened. And I was saying, oh yeah, we're making a collective descent into the underworld of the unconscious, which is the place of, of madness, of death, of evil. And then the lockdown happened, and little did I realize how prescient I was being. But the point is, you don't want to get stuck in that underworld. That's dangerous and that's tragic. But the archetype is, by making that descent into the darkness of our nature, into the darkness of the unconscious. It's something you would never voluntarily choose to do. You'd have to be truly insane to do that, because the suffering is so over the top. But it's something that, in the literature, the would-be shaman or healer or wounded healer is called by the spirits. And if you don't assent to the calling, that's when they become really neurotic, maybe even psychotic, and die. But if you say, yes, I will follow my calling, if it's a true calling, it brings you down into the the realm of the unconscious, into the darkness. And the archetype is, at a certain point, the shaman then comes up back into the world bearing a gift. And the gift is their creativity that they actually got as a result of their descent into the unconscious. And I'm saying that's the archetype that's activated in the collective mind that you're pointing at. And we're all being called to be wounded healers and shamans. And what is the wounded healer? What is the shaman? It's the creative artist. And one more thing I want to say about it, because it's so important. What does a shaman wounded healer do? They're so empathic, they take on the illness of the person they're working with or the community they're working with. Taking on has a double meaning. It means they take it within themselves and they have it out with. Okay. So when the shamanic archetype is activated in us, we take on the illness that's in the field and we fall ill ourselves. But that, if we get stuck in that, then that's tragic, and we then need a shaman to help us to heal. But the idea is that the would-be shaman takes that occasion of falling ill as an actual opportunity to even more deeply connect with their nature, with the self. And by doing that, they've created a pathway in the collective unconscious of our species, of the collective psyche, for other people to do the same. Because the key thing is, when you recognize that what you're suffering from personally is an actual reflection of the malady and the suffering that's happening in the collective. And you begin to realize, wait a second, I as a microcosm am actually reflecting the very illness that the macrocosm is suffering from. That's a profound realization. And it also is showing you that you're not separate, that we are all interconnected. And going back to this mind virus, the Wetiko mind virus, in essence, it's an identification with thinking you exist as a separate self. And as soon as we think we exist as a separate self, then we imagine the world exists objectively. And it becomes a self-reinforcing feedback loop where we actually are casting a spell on ourselves, thinking we exist in a way that we don't. That's the mind virus. When you have the realization that, wait a second, what I'm suffering from is a reflection of what's happening collectively, you see through the illusion of the separate self. That's to recognize our interconnectedness, our interdependence. That's to be on the pathway towards that. Oh, wow, we are actually one. We're not separate. And in the realm of psyche, we are all interconnected. That's Jung's idea of the collective unconscious, that we're all interconnected via this, in a way, higher dimensional mind.
I'm going to turn this around a little bit now, Paul. I'm the psychiatrist, but let's say I'm a form of wounded healer.
Right.
And let's say that what I'm doing is developing now a book for called the psychotherapy for the collective human organism. I have not had the psychotic experiences in my terms that you have had. I have not had the awakening experiences that you have had. My thing has been through synchronicity, coincidences all my life, starting when I was younger. And that's what my next book coming out in May is about, as a just describing them. So I haven't gone into the depths, and yet I am taking on, and I like the double meaning of taking on that you bring up. I am taking on the negative thought patterns and emotions, is a simple way of saying it, of the collective mind. And
Right.
that's why I wanted to talk with you, because I wanted to add more to my understanding of the collective mind. And just for your idea, I think of collective conscious, collective subconscious, and collective unconscious. I think there's more to the collective mind than this unconscious, and I have some differences with Jung, but it doesn't matter. It's a
Right.
collective mind that we are
Right.
dealing with. So as I'm taking this on, and it's causing me some distress to
Right.
be writing about this,
Yeah. Yeah.
because
Yeah.
I have an urge, a need, a drive to put down various aspects that need to be developed. So I'd ask you to comment on what I'm doing without having had the descent into the deep darkness. I've had some pretty,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
but nothing like what you've gone through and a lot of
Yeah.
other
Yeah.
people gone through. I've been on the other side,
Right. Right.
saying you're crazy,
Yeah. Yeah.
probably
Yeah.
when I didn't know they were crazy, but I was
Yeah.
more
Yeah.
open. In fact, when I was a first year resident, one of my colleagues called me into his office and said, Bernie, you're psychotic. You need some help. Because I was interested in stuff like astrology and
Right.
telepathy and synchronicity. So I've been a little, somewhat, but nothing of the degree
Yeah.
you've
Yeah.
been.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I wonder if you just comment on this.
Yeah, no, I have a lot to say about it, and I appreciate your being so vulnerable. Um, I'll just share with you. First off, I'll start with a story. So, the last two Wetiko books I wrote, I wasn't the one who was doing the Audible. I wasn't reading them. This is not my thing. So I had a friend who was doing the audiobooks, and he's a minister, right? And he was also a Jungian therapist and a Tibetan Buddhist monk. Very amazing guy. He one of the founders of the Occupy Wall Street movement, but now he's a minister. And he was reading the books about Wetiko, and he called me up one day and he goes, "Paul, I cannot believe what's happening when I'm reading the Wetiko books." And he says, "What's happening is that," and keep in mind he's a minister. He goes, "I'm being assaulted by demonic forces."
Ooh.
And I just began laughing. And I said, well, just imagine what it was like being the author, because as I'm writing the Wetiko books, I am literally being assaulted by demonic forces. But I understood, instead of that being pathological and an expression how screwed up I am, I was realizing, oh, wow, that's a sign I'm on the right path. That's the way it works. Of course, as we get closer to our light, the darker forces whose very job it is to make sure we don't connect with our light will do everything and anything in their power to stop us. But as I really stabilized the realization that no, that's like the best news I've heard all day, that I'm getting assaulted by demonic forces, that's an expression that I'm on the right path. Then all of a sudden, those demonic forces help me to find my voice even more and to write an even better book. So that's one thing. The second thing, so one of the dangers of somebody in the role of, being the wounded healer shaman, like you, like so many of us, like all of us in potential, is that we get stuck. We take on, because we're so permeable and empathic and sensitive, we take on the negative energy or the negative emotion or the illness that's in the field, and we can get caught in that. That's a danger. Okay. So the point is, when we empathically take on those negative energies, to develop in a way the capacity to differentiate what is me and who am I and what belongs to me. Yeah, you have to own on some level all those negative emotions, on some level they're mine, but you also have to be able to distinguish yourself from them. And that's why Jung again and again is talking about the profound importance of objectifying contents of the unconscious, to put them outside of yourself, give them shape, form, what is their name? And by doing that, you're actually creating yourself separate from them. So instead of being identical with them unconsciously and possessed by them so as to be compelled to act them out in a destructive way, you develop relationship with them. And by doing that, you're strengthening your experience of the self. And, that's intrinsic to every spiritual practice that I've ever heard about. And so, that's, if we like people like you or me or people who are called to be wounded healers are not, if we haven't developed that muscle that I've just described, then the danger is we become unconsciously possessed. And Jung again and again was saying humanity is possessed. Humanity is in need of an exorcism. And just one final thought, one of the greatest of the Western shamans, people probably have heard of him. He wrote The Way of the Shaman, Harner, Michael Harner. I used to hang out with him because I used to work in New York City, and he was a professor there. So I would just call him up and go to his office and pick his brains about shamanism. And one thing he said to me that I'll never forget, he said, yeah, there are two dangers of when you get called to be a shaman. Like on one hand, and keep in mind, I'm not in any way saying I'm a shaman. I'm a work in progress like all of us, and I joke with my friends, only in my dreams am I a shaman. But what Michael Harner said to me, he says there's two great dangers of when you get called to be on the shamanic path. The first one is to have like a little experience, of some sort of something supernatural, and then you put up a shingle that you're a shaman, and you can just do damage to so many people, including your own soul. The second danger is for us to stay unconscious of our intrinsic shamanic abilities. That creates poison. And I immediately knew what he meant, because I know the greatest poison in the human psyche is unexpressed creativity. Okay. So we all have these shamanic abilities. And it does not mean we have to wear feathers and shake rattles. No, our shamanic accessories could be the keyboard of a computer, could be like a video cam. And but we're all being called to become ourselves. As Jung says, the greatest healing, the most profound healing comes as a result of connecting with being oneself. That's what we're talking about.
We're getting close to the end of our time, Paul, and I'd I'd like you to address a polarity that you have indirectly described: individuation, becoming yourself, maybe with a big S, establishing the boundaries between self and the demons out there. And recently, I've been attacked by a demon out there, a person with unresolved something or others that
Right,
took it out on me. The projections are going on all the time.
right.
And I very much like the idea that to turn it into something positive. It's another indication that I'm on the right track. And it's been a while to taken a while to do that. I first was hurt a lot by it, and
Right.
I'm bewildered by it. And
Right.
then kind of stabilized by it, then compassion for the other person for that the empathic part of it, and then I had to give that up and establish the boundary that you're so clearly describing, that this
Right.
is me and this is that person. There's
Yeah.
that and
Yeah.
that, and we're not the same. I don't have to take all that on, and that's part of what
Right.
you're suggesting. To become more yourself has been one of the major themes of what I'm hearing from you. On the
Yeah.
other hand, you're an exponent of non-duality, where
Yeah.
where it's all one. And I'd like you to resolve, in the time we have remaining, this polarity that you have described without trying to
Yeah.
say how they work together.
Yeah, yeah. Well, first, before I even get to that, the situation with this person who's like, in a way, you were saying some sort of external demon coming through the instrument of this person attacking you. I mean, that can be an incredible blessing because on the one hand, what's in you, where is the hook in you that's attracting the projection? That could be an incredible gift for you to find that you might not have even have been aware of without this person, playing that role. The second thing about that circumstance, and then I'll get to your question, because I've had that too. There was one time I was giving a talk, in town this years ago, probably 25, 30 years ago. And this new guy who is, had just moved into Portland, who was also doing dream work. And I could tell he was very competitive. I had met him, earlier. And all of a sudden he came to the talk and was standing in the back row. And I felt this judgment and this criticism from him because he was feeling threatened. And, I'm giving the talk and I'm experiencing this, and it was a little bit destabilizing. But then I realized, oh, he's the embodiment of that part of me that judges me and that's critical of me. And once I recognized that, I became lucid and I realized, wow, I'm dreaming right now. And it was like an incredibly expansive experience. So here was the seeming negative dream character, throwing this negative energy on me. And the way I was interpreting it helped me to become lucid. So I just wanted to offer that to you for your
Uh, I,
circumstance.
so I'll respond to that. This person betrayed me, and I've been on the other side of betraying other people.
Right,
So I got to be able to see more clearly the betrayal tendencies that I have had, just as you could see
right.
yourself in what he was judging and the way he was judging you. So we
Yeah,
we
that's
both are.
beautiful. Right. And that's so much to your credit that you would then, out of this experience, instead of just keeping the demon out there and, oh, I'm just, a poor innocent victim and, I'm being attacked and he's betraying me. The fact that you took it the next step and did the self-reflection, that's so much to your credit. That's beautiful. That's what I'm talking about. Now, the thing about, everything being one and non-dual, and in because I have this new book coming out on quantum physics, which is showing quantum physics is empirically proved that we're having a collective dream, and that's what the book is about. And I have a chapter in there about singularities. And people think with a singularity, there's no multiplicity at all. It's all just one. And that's a limited version of a singularity because the singularity is so all-encompassingly one, like a quantum universe is, there's no separate parts, that a singularity embraces multiplicity, that we can have multiplicity in a singularity and things can appear to be separate in a very convincing form, just like they do in this waking dream. And that doesn't negate the fact that they're also, aren't separate things that are interacting, but it's all one whole seamlessly interconnected quantum system with no division or separation to be found anywhere. And so it's like, I think of Jung. Jung was continually talking about the profound importance of holding the creative tension of the opposites. And any creative person knows, oh my God, when we're involved in the creative process, there are these incredible opposites and it can be an agony. It can be very painful. And what Jung is pointing at is that if we prematurely identify with one of the opposites and then exclude the other or project out the other, then guaranteed we will develop a dis-ease in our soul. But if we hold that creative tension together, This is total alchemy. Alchemy was about the coincidence of opposites, of spirit and matter. That's the whole synchronistic universe. You see, the thing about the idea of synchronicity is that this universe is synchronistic each and every moment. And the crazy thing about synchronicities is that the more we actually cultivate the vision to actually see this universe as synchronistic, the more it will manifest that way. We're actually participating in the evoking of the synchronistic universe. It's not just something we intellectually understand or are passively watching. Like you've been saying in your work, we're actively participating in the evocation of this universe as ongoing synchronicity. And that's pointing at the non-dual nature, that mind and matter are not separate at the most fundamental level. And that's another way of saying that we're having a collective dream.
Well, that's a great way for us to end, Paul, because that's what I'm doing, is trying to bring synchronicity awareness to a broad population, increasingly more. And part of what I'm doing, you refer to indirectly, without talking about it too much, is the ability to self-reflect, which is fundamental to your observer. When you were having that
Right.
episode that lasted a long time, you were observing your own mind. And
Right.
that ability is central, in the way I'm thinking, central to being able to see how mind and matter are really part of the same thing. And there's a tension between selfness and wholeness that we live in, and being able to live in that tension
Yeah.
is part
And
of the evolution.
yeah, and if I could just say, like with his idea of holding the tension of the opposites, what Jung says is when you hold it congruently and you suffer holding the tension of the opposites, out of that comes what he calls the transcendent function. He also calls it the reconciling symbol. In other words, out of that comes grace. And he points out that a perfect symbol of this is Christ on the cross, of holding the tension of the opposites. And what happened? That was the portal for the resurrected body. So that is really, I'm glad I remembered to say that's the fruition out of authentically holding that creative tension of the opposites.
Yeah, the creative tension of the opposite creates. It
Yeah.
gives forth something new, and then you get
Right.
another polarity that you'll be able to hold in tension. It's part of the creative process.
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
Well, Paul, thank you very much for an enlightening discussion. It's really fun for a lot of reasons, but the fact that we were able to talk about the collective mind and Wetiko, but most importantly, for both of us, for a psychiatrist to be hearing your story.
Yeah.
Gesundheit for me,
Yeah. Totally.
because I'm embarrassed for my psychiatric profession for the way they mistreat people who have meaningful coincidences, let
Yeah.
alone the potential healing.
Yeah.
Again,
Bless you. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I'm reacting to the profession I'm part of. That
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah. Yeah.
so I'm so appreciative, and so are very, very many people, that you were able to transform the alchemical horror of your experience into something so beautiful as what you are doing. So thank you very much for being with me.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I just want to say one thing. And like, I so appreciate, sharing with you being a psychiatrist, but let me just say, it was, I just barely even touched the surface of the horror of what I went through in psychiatry. It's so much worse than, I was able to transmit just in the few words that I used.
Well, you may think you didn't communicate it.
Right. Okay. No, thank you. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
You're
I
welcome.
mean,
You may
just,
think you didn't communicate it. and that's your
Right.
problem.
Right. Totally. Totally. I will own
That's your
that.
problem.
Yeah. 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 No, for
And
sure.
it's your problem from feeling not being heard for so much of your life.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah. No, totally.
you were heard. I mean, I saw you on the ward trying to say I'm not crazy, and I saw you on the ward
Right.
taking the antipsychotics, making you more crazy because you
Yeah.
lost touch with what you were tuned into so beautifully, and
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
made you yet more crazy.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
You got heard by at least this one psychiatrist.
Okay. No,
Not
I will take that in. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and not that I don't know what your father did and all the other
Yeah. Yeah.
details,
Yeah.
but
Sure.
that
Yeah.
one, I heard you, and I heard the crazy makingness of that circumstances. So
Right.
you were heard more than you thought, Paul.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, totally. No, I appreciate that. Thank you. And yeah, it's just a pleasure hanging out and sharing, sharing notes. So thank you for the invite.
You're very welcome, and I'll let you know when this gets published.
Sounds great. Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you, Paul.